Hi ladies, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Radio Woman podcast. I'm your host, Sekina Alau, and I'm delighted to have you join me today. Whether you're taking a drive, you're coming back from work, or you're in the kitchen, or you're taking a walk, thank you for being here. This is episode 2 of season 3, and I have one question for you as I start today's episode, and that question is, what's the state of your heart? Okay, so what's the state of your heart? Is it filled with panic? Is it filled with worry? Is it calm? Is it peaceful? Is it full of fear? Or is it full of trust? I asked this question because this is something that I personally have also been dealing with in the past, all my life, but also like in the past couple of weeks and months. And I think many of us can relate to this. So what is the primary posture of our hearts? When we are thinking of doing things, when we are thinking of maybe a next project or a next step that we want to take, do we find ourselves constantly being afraid? Or do we find that we trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would do the best, right? So that is my question. What's the state of your heart? So about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was talking to a mom, and our conversation came into the topic of raising children in this time and age. We spoke about, the possibility or consideration of moving to other parts of the world to raise our kids, right? And she said this because she was like, an older person who was just asking like, how is she managing in this age and time? Like, things are so tough, things are different, the values, morals, everything has changed. And she's wondering if she would prefer to go back to her home country or somewhere in like Africa or maybe the Middle East, as is going on these days. So a lot of people are moving from the West to like the Middle East to Africa and stuff. And for valid reasons, right? Some think that might be a better environment to raise their family, particularly in terms of instilling Islamic values. And some maybe are just tired of like the way the West is, and they just want to explore. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But what I wanted to speak about today is, what is the motivation if you're even considering moving? So when we were speaking, I had my opinion on the matter, and I also acknowledge that I understand her fear, which is a very valid fear, because quite frankly, I've had these reservations as well when I was considering moving abroad. So this past year, I have rehashed those fears. I have thought about those fears, and again, it's something I said I've had those fears for a long while. So while I was dragging my feet, should I move? Should I not move? Those were some of the concerns I had. Was, how is the Islam? How am I going to make sure that I instill like the proper Islamic values, ethos, beliefs in my kids in a world where every other thing is like trying to go against your Islamic values? So what I've realized in the past 1 year is that the solution to this fear of how we're going to raise our kids in this age and time is not necessarily running or fleeing. Rather, it is by walking through the fear. And what do I mean? So when we talk about moving, we usually are talking from a place of privilege, whether we acknowledge it or not, because the fact is not everyone has or would have the opportunity to move, maybe by virtue of the fact that they just can't move. Maybe their country is in a bad state, like in terms of war. It could be in terms of also financial capabilities. So moving is not cheap, right? So for you to pick up yourself from one place to another is not cheap, however you want to look at it, right? So you require funds, and some people might not have those funds, and they just have to deal and work with what they have. So for us, anyone that feels like, I can pick up my bag and go somewhere, we need to acknowledge the fact that we do have some level of privilege, in the sense that you do have the opportunity to move if you can. And if you think that's the best way for you, by all means, please go for it. But I just wanted to state that some people don't have that opportunity, and they just simply need to make use of the situation that life has given them, right? So moving to a more Islamic country or an African country doesn't guarantee anything, nada, zilch, right? So everywhere has its pros and cons. So when I was talking to her, I just moved from Nigeria to Canada, and I was telling her that what I have defined this whole situation of moving as is, in Canada, you find what you're looking for, or rather in the West, you find what you're looking for. Would it be easy? Maybe not, but I find that if you're looking for career and you're looking for ways to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will facilitate it for you. But if you're also focused or looking at the other side, Allah will also facilitate it for you, right? So for me, I have realized that, whether I am in Nigeria, whether I'm in Canada, whether I'm in America, whether I'm in Dubai, whether I'm in Saudi Arabia, everywhere has its own pros and cons. They all have their tests and trials, and they all have their good. So what do? I just need to make use of whatever place that I am in, right? I need to use it to the best of my ability. So, for example, back home in Nigeria, I personally, for the past couple of years, have tried to not listen to any form of music. I grew up listening to music and all that. So I have personally tried to restrain myself from doing that. But back home, once I step out of my house, even if I'm not consciously looking to listen to music, once I step out of my house, the Yarisi, the person that is selling something on the side of the road, or a restaurant, or just by the side, somebody is blasting music at top volume, and there is no consequence for that. There's no repercussion. But here in the West, I find that there's a level of noise control. You cannot just play music in a way that disturbs other people. So if I'm not consciously going to look for music, I wouldn't hear it. But if I was back home, whether I like it or not, I would. So there are so many songs that I know, not because I even know the artist or because I know the title of the song, but I know their lyrics just because I hear them on the wayside or something, right? So that's just an example to say that everywhere has its pros and cons, right? Also here, you find that there are some things you're on the road and, people are just using foul languages like swear words, and, I'm with my child and I'm like, oh, you don't want them to pick those things. So everywhere has its pros and cons. But what I do know, like I said, is moving from a place of fear is not the solution. If your kids are going to be submitters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would be, not because primarily of the environment that they are in, but because of Allah's mercy. So we've had situations, even stories from the Quran, examples from the Quran, where we find people that were living. So for example, the wife of Fir'aun, we find that she was in a place where, the man that was almost like the evilest of the evilest, but she was still able to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She was still able to, and Allah promised her Jannah. So, and we also find situations where people had to leave the midst of righteous people and they went somewhere. So, for example, Prophet Yusuf, he left his father, his family that were worshippers. They believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in one God. And he went to a place where they did not necessarily follow that same belief, but he was still able to remain steadfast. So what I'm saying is the environment matters, but if I was going to describe it, so there's a ring and you are in the innermost ring, and there are other rings like circles around. So the further away the ring, the less impact it has on you that is in the innermost ring. So what you want to focus on is, those maybe 2 or 3 rings that are closest to you, and that is what you can control. So what we need to do wherever we find ourselves is that we need to immerse ourselves in lots and lots of dua. I cannot tell you how much we need to really, really make lots of dua, and you have to make that dua for even yourself, because even though you might feel like you have faith or your faith is strong, as we know, iman fluctuates. So we need to make dua for ourselves, our children, and even our generation unborn. And we see this from the life of our father, Prophet Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wasalam, where, he made dua for both generation, that like his children that were with him and the generation unborn. So you want to make lots of dua wherever you might be, that Allah should help you to raise your kids in the best way possible. It should grant you the wisdom, it should grant you the strength to navigate wherever you are, because man, the world is wilding. Everywhere is crazy right now. Like, there is no safe zone. Honestly, there's no safe zone. Even the places where you feel like should be safe from like fitna, from everything, is changing every single day. So you need to make sure that you hold on tight, and hold on tight to the rope of Allah, which is the Quran. Recite the Quran every day. Let it penetrate your heart, so that the state of your heart becomes one that is peaceful and trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at least maybe 90% of the time, because as human beings, we would always have fears, and we have to be realistic. We would always have those fears from time to time. We'll always have those whispers from shaitan. But at least if your primary state is one that is trusting, then it kind of makes it easy. And just knowing that Allah is in control would make things a lot much easier. So whatever 10% of your heart is still maybe like worried or fearful, I believe that 10% is to keep your heart in check and keep you steadfast, not you're not slacking. So you just need a little bit of spice, that little bit of fearfulness, or should I say something to just keep you on your toes, really. So don't just slack and be like, oh, Allah is in control, so you will not do anything. I'm covered, my children are covered, my family is covered. But that little bit of worry from time to time keeps you on your toes, makes you keep making dua. It helps you to keep holding on to the words of Allah and try doing the best that you can to ensure that your children cultivate the values and of Islam. So in any country that you find yourself, in any situation that you find yourself, you want to tie your camel, focus on what's within your control. This is something that I am learning every single day, because when you start worrying about things, there's only so much that we have control over in the grand scheme of things. And when we start worrying, most times we're worrying about what's not in our control, and it just keeps us stuck. It keeps us worried in a state of anxiety, which doesn't really help us, honestly. So whatever fear that you have about raising your children should propel you to do the very best that you can in nurturing them. And your fears should motivate you to be intentional about nurturing a hopeful and loving relationship between yourself and Allah, and in extension, or by extension, in your children. Because again, you cannot give what you do not have. So you are like the first role model to your children. Have your own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's your level of trust in him? Those are the cues that your children pick up, and they're able to also transfer into their own lives, right? So those are the things you want to focus on. Focus on what's within your control. So dua is a very powerful weapon. It's a weapon that you can use to kill all this madness that is going on around us, right? There are lots and lots of duas, and I find that our morning azkar have lots of duas that we can use to combat so many worries that we might have. So there are lots. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has given us lots and lots of duas that we can use whenever we feel apprehension, whenever we feel fear, and those duas have been documented for us. And this is why our morning azkars, our evening azkars are very, very important to do, no matter how little that we can do, right? So it's very important that we do them as much as we can. I know it might not be easy, especially if you don't have it as a habit, but it's just something to bear in mind, that we should take our morning and evening azkars very, very seriously. Even if you don't know the Arabic, you can say it in English. You can make dua to Allah in whatever language that you know. So there are lots and lots and lots of duas. So even just going through like the standard morning azkar, you'll find lots and lots of them. So there's la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, which is there's no might and no power except with Allah. So Allah has the power to overcome any issues that you're having. If it's people, if it's the environment, Allah has the power to overcome any rubbish they might want to bring your way or your family's way. There's Ya Ayyuha Qayyum bi rahmatika astaghith aslih li shani kullahu wa la takilni ila nafsi tarfata ayn. And I love this one so much. So it's just basically, telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not leave you in charge of your affairs, even from the blink of an eye, and it should help you rectify your affairs. So we make mistakes in parenting. Sometimes we slack. Sometimes we just let things go. Sometimes we don't even know what we are doing. In fact, not sometimes, most times we don't know what we are doing. So you want to really invite Allah to guide you on what you have to do so that you can parent your children in the best way, because honestly it's not by our might. We need to ensure that we keep making dua from the heart. Arabic, English, any language that you are, Urdu, Yoruba, whatever it is that you know, just make dua sincerely from the bottom of your heart. Again, going back to focusing on what you can control. So remember the example I made about circular rings, and you're like in the most innermost parts. You want to make sure that you focus on those 2-3 rings that are within you. So it could be the type of environment that you live. It could be the neighbors that are around you. There are some communities that that there are mostly Muslims in this neighborhood. You want to be intentional about saying, oh, can we move to that neighborhood? You want to say, okay, what schools are my children going to? Are there Islamic schools around? Can I enroll my children in there? Are there madrasas that I can enroll my children in? My family and my friends, closest friends, can I kind of do a sweep and make sure that as much as possible they are also Muslims that share the same values as I can. I'm not saying that we cannot be friends with non-Muslims, because we live in a wider, we live in the world. The world is full of different people with different beliefs, different ideologies, and what we want to let our children know is this is the reality, this is what it is. Even though you are Muslim, there are other people that are not Muslim, and you need to treat them with respect, with kindness, as human beings. But you also want to make sure that you surround yourself with people that share your values, because they have lots and lots of influence on your life. So you want to say, what are the kind of extracurricular activities that my kids do? Can I make sure that I take my children to the masjids more? The shows that we watch at home, the things that we subscribe our kids to, the games and all that. Those things are within your control. Those are some of the things that you can control, and you want to focus on those. What is happening in the wider society? So those things like the government, their laws, or people that are in the outermost ring, you can't really do much about those. So there's no point trying to fix that in your day-to-day. I'm not saying that we shouldn't advocate, or we shouldn't share our thoughts, but the point is focus on what is within your control. Can I teach my children myself, even at home? Focus on their education. Don't just leave everything to the outside world, right? Don't just leave all the teaching to their teachers. What can you do as well at home? What values can you instill in them? So everything that you're afraid of, change that mindset to say, okay, this thing I'm afraid of, maybe my child not growing up with the right akida. So can I myself learn in addition to maybe what the teacher is doing, and also teach them? Because honestly, in the first couple of years, like I said, you're the first and foremost role model for your children. And after a while, you might not be, but whatever the case is, the home, if you make your home like a safe haven for your children, they will still come back. There's something that a friend of mine told me once, and I found it so true. It was, where were we? Okay, it was during Hajj one time, and we were just talking about, our upbringing and everything. And she mentioned something. She said, a child would always go back to what they know. And this rang very true for me, because I remember as a child, when, my parents took us so growing up, we didn't grow up as Muslims. because my mom was Christian, my dad he's a Muslim, but he wasn't practicing as at that time. So like the first maybe 9 years of my life, I didn't really grow up as a Muslim. In fact, I grew up more as a Christian because my mom used to take us to church and stuff. And one day my dad wakes up and is like, okay, let's take you guys are going somewhere, and he took us to madrasa. And honestly, that wasn't really a good experience for me because of the way it was done. But I did learn the Quran, how to recite the Quran, and even after that I did leave. I didn't really practice as a Muslim. I used to pray and all that, but I didn't really I don't know how to put it. Like, I didn't take any extra effort to learn the Quran again or know it for myself. It was just like, okay, yeah, my dad wanted me to learn the Quran. I've done this, and can I move on with my life? And I went to like a Christian school, and there was no pressure to do anything really. So, but going into university, alhamdulillah, Allah sent friends. Like the person who eventually became my best friend, she was my roommate throughout my time in university, and she had a more concrete background as a Muslim. So I was able to pick that from her, and I went back to what I knew, because even though I went to like secular schools and everything, I wasn't actively taught that at home. What I was taught by virtue of schooling or madrasa was, being a Muslim. So I went back to that knowledge. I started to recite the Quran again. I started to learn, even though some of my alphabets, everything was all jumbled up, but I started to go back to that knowledge, and that's how I started to build up again. So always remember this, that inshallah, by Allah's help, by his assistance, whatever the case is, even if our children decide to go astray for a while or go, or whatever it is, inshallah, Allah will not let your efforts of trying to instill Islamic knowledge in them at a youthful age, Allah will always make them go back to that knowledge, right? So again, this also shows that everything that we do as parents is not in our hands. We can only try our best. We can only put in effort, but whatever the outcome is out of our hands. So what we can do is focus on what is within our control, and that is, trying to instill, teach them the right knowledge, teach them, what they need to know, the 5 pillars of Islam, proper Aqidah, those things that we can do, even if we don't take them to school. All those things are things that we can do at home from very young ages, even as like babies, even before we give birth to our children, making dua for them, praying for them. Those are things that we can do. So if we allow fear to paralyze us, what happens is we miss out on the joy of living. It makes us miss out on enjoying our share of this dunya. So instead of parenting with intention and presence, we are worried. We are looking into the future, a future that has not even come, a future that we don't know what's going to happen, right? And instead of us to just really immerse ourselves in the experience of today, in the day-to-day, and doing what we can in the best way that we can, we would worry, and we have that very big potential of losing out on building amazing relationships with our children, and hopefully that also helps them to build an amazing relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we keep looking into the future in a fearful state, thinking that, it's only when maybe I move to so and so country, or and all that, or I move to this area, or I move my children from this to that, that is only when our children would have that iman or whatever, then we only deceive ourselves. So we should change ourselves, because nothing is guaranteed, right? Only Allah Azza wa Jal has the keys to your children's hearts, to your heart. So just do your part and leave everything to him, right? Leave everything to him. Now, I have to put a disclaimer here that I'm not saying that environment doesn't matter at all. if I say that, then I'll be being foolhardy, right? I'm not saying that. And of course, I do know that there is reward and there's a big blessing in doing hijrah for the sake of Allah. So if you feel like where you are is stopping you from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the best way that you can, please by all means make hijrah. Make your intention, make hijrah. But likewise, if it's that you just want to explore, you want to, see the world, and you don't mind taking your family along with you, please by all means do so, right? Allah has made the earth vast for us. We are not stuck to one place. Everywhere is for your taking, for your living, as long as your intention is right. But all I am saying is that fear shouldn't be the primary motivator. Neither should you think that environment alone would have you and your family sorted. We have to do the work. You have to do the work. I have to do the work, because the fact is we will face tests everywhere, even in Mecca, even in Medina, the holiest of places in the world, right? We will face tests. So what you want to do as Muslims is that our primary heart state should be the one of trust. And not just trust in ourselves, but rather trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's the one that controls our heart. He's got us. And as long as you believe in Him and you put your trust in Him and you look to Him for your every problem, and of course you put in the work, He will not disappoint us. I was reading a verse of the Quran the other day, and something really struck me. I don't remember this surah now, but something really struck me, and it was about how Allah said that those that believe in Him, put their trust in Him, did good deeds on earth, on the day of judgment, He will not make us amongst those who are disappointed. Like, do you know what that means? Like, Allah would not want you to be disappointed that, okay, after all this work that you have done for me, like I would not make you amongst those that will regret or be disappointed in all the effort that you put. So that was so powerful to me. I was like, subhanallah, like Allah is just, like, it was so comforting to me. And the truth is, if we truly claim to submit, like to be Muslims, which basically means submitting to Allah. So if we truly claim to submit to the Lord of the worlds and agree that only Him owns our life and He knows everything, then we should actually surrender to Him. So we've just left the season that truly teaches us this. So Dhul Hijjah is a time where we are supposed to really lean into how best we can submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So remember the story of Prophet Ibrahim. Allah told him, after so many years of looking for a child, and Allah gave him a child, and He's then saying, go and sacrifice your child for my sake. And Prophet Ibrahim did not hesitate, even though it was painful for him. Imagine, just put yourself in those situations. Like, after so many years, and not just 3 years or 4 years or years of looking for a child, like decades of looking for a child, and you now finally get that child, and Allah is saying you should go and sacrifice that child, and you go, you take on that commandment, you answer to that call without hesitation. That in itself is a true example of how we should submit as Muslims. So of course he was a prophet, of course times are different, but that's why we have those examples for us to take after, for us to use as pointers on how best we can serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I get it because as human beings, it's in our nature to want to control things, and that's why again we're encouraged to always interact with reminders. Look at the lives of the prophets, look at the life of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look at the lives of his sahabiyas, and take those examples and use it. Look at the Quran, look at people around us, the lives of other people. There's some people that are so amazing, mashallah. Like, those are things that you can pick up from, you can learn from them, right? Look at the seerah of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, our Prophet should be like our biggest role model in our character, in the way we do things, the way we parent. You know, those are things. Prophet Zachariah. You know, there's so many people that we can just really tap into their lives as role models, right? So those are things that we should always interact with, those reminders, so it keeps us steadfast and it keeps our mind at peace, knowing that at the end of the day, we can only do our part and Allah will take care of the rest. So sisters and brothers, if you're listening, today I have spoken about parenting, but this also applies to every other aspect of our lives, whether it's in like your career, your relationships, your finances, you know, your business, whatever it is, yourselves, your own self-development, you know, whatever projects you're trying to do, whatever knowledge you're trying to gain, whatever next steps or goal that you're trying to hit, make sure that your heart is in a state of trust, in a state of peace and calm. Trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that He's got you and He's the controller of everything in this universe. So, what's the primary state of your heart? That's the question I'm asking you again. What is the primary state of your heart, and how is it driving your behavior or your reactions? That's something I really want you to think about as we close out this podcast today. As for me, I am done living in a state of fear, and I am bi'idhnillah, and with Allah's aid, moving primarily to a state of trust in Him. I pray that Allah assists you and I, everyone listening, your families, your generations to come. I pray that Allah assists us to worship Him in the best way. He gives us the strength, the hidayah. I pray He showers us with His mercy, and I pray He keeps us steadfast upon the truth and His deen. Ameen. So let me know what you think. Do share. Again, you can share your thoughts with me on Instagram at Nisaba. I really love to read from you. You can email me at podcast@nisaba.com or sekina@nisaba.com. I really love to hear from you guys. So till next time, stay trusting in your Lord. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.